Assalamu alaikum viewers, this is Surfraz Karni from Pegham-e-Haqq. Today we will be joined by Dr. Abla Hasan from Nebraska. Let me give you a brief introduction about her. She's currently an associate professor of Arabic language and culture at the University of Nebraska. She has PhD in philosophy from the University of Nebraska. She has done a lot of research in Quran, and she also an author of the book called Decoding the Egalitarianism of the Quran, Retrieving Lost Voices on Gender, which is available on Amazon. I would highly recommend to get this book. She has done a lot of research, like I said. Today we have chose the topic about Surah 4, verse 34, which is a very important ayah in Quran. A lot of people have questions about that, and she has done very good research on that. So we will ask her about her research about this very important surah. So let me invite her. Assalamu alaikum, doctor. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you, brother and sister?
Good, good. Thanks for joining our show today. So we will be discussing about Surah 434. A lot of people have confusion. They want clarity on that. They want to make sure they're clear on this concept, which people have used. They have different interpretation. I want you to please show your research, what you have researched on this, especially targeting this ayah 434. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Brother Surfaz. And thank you for your efforts to offer an opportunity through your platform to discuss 434, because many shy away from discussing controversial topics and controversial verses. And with no doubt for many, including myself, 434 is the most controversial verse in the Quran. And this is the verse that, according to many, recommends husbands with the 3 correction methods that escalates from admonishing their wives to withholding sex and using intimacy as a way to punish their wives, and can escalate even to physical beating. A little bit about 434 and why we need to go back to 434 before I provide from my research a reflection which I refer to in my book, Decoding the Egalitarianism of the Quran, Retrieving Lost Voices on Gender. I include 20 arguments for a new interpretation of 434 that goes against what we've learned so far from the tradition. So back to the need to go back to 434. First of all, according to the traditional interpretation of 434, it includes a clear self-contradiction with the rest of the Quran. And this is the first reason that should motivate us to go back to rethinking 434. So to make myself clear, the problem is not, as some might think, that we have a more modern approach to marriage and we're seeking out changing things from the tradition because they don't fit our modern mentality. No, it's not that simple. The fact that 434, according to the traditional interpretation, contradicts the rest of the Quran and contradicts the clear gender egalitarian message of the Quran. And this is a big deal because the Quran is not as a perfect book, according even to the belief of Muslims. Even traditional Muslims, traditionalists, doesn't allow for contradictions. How we know about that? Because the Quran refers to that very clearly. For example, we read in 482, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عَنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Do they not then reflect on the Quran? Had it been from anyone other than Allah, they would have certainly found in it many inconsistencies, right? So having a verse in the Quran, one verse, 434, that contradicts the clear gender egalitarian message in the rest of the Quran is a case of a contradiction within the Quran itself that we need to address. And of course, we're kind of, I'm very sad to admit that in the tradition, according to the traditional education, religious education many of us receive, we're kind of used to contradictions. It's fine to deal with contradictions, but no, it doesn't apply to the Quran. It's not fine, it's not okay at all to go to the Quran and to claim contradictions in the Quran.
It's a very good point. Right.
Thank you so much. And this is for a simple reason, because contradictions in the tradition are a human understanding of the Quran, different human understandings of the Quran. It's not a reflection of the Quran per se, right? And therefore we allow contradictions. But something even more serious, when there's a contradiction, it tells you there's something wrong, right?
That's the point.
It's an indication. So this is the first reason we should be rethinking 434, and we shouldn't be satisfied with the traditional interpretation of 434. Let's remember here that in addition to having different people, different human efforts trying to understand the real meaning of 434, the honest attempts to understand the Quran, let's add to that this honesty from those who had their own reflections, right? But probably it goes against all what we know about the Quran. Let's always remember that our tradition is not written only by those who honestly followed Muhammad, but also by the same enemies of Muhammad, of Prophet Muhammad, right?
Yes, no doubt.
How do we know that? We know that from the Quran itself as well, right? We read, for example, وَمِمَّنْ حَوْلَكُمْ مِنَ الْأَعْرَابِ مُنَافِقُونَ وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ مَرَدُوا عَلَى النِّفَاقِ لَا تَعْلَمُهُمْ نَحْنُ نَعْلَمُهُمْ, right? So the Quran is acknowledging that around you, some Bedouins around you, and some people in Al-Medina around you, some of them were hypocrites. This is the Quran.
Yes.
This is the Quran acknowledging their existence. Even more concerning, maradu ala nifaq, they mastered hypocrisy. And the Quran is addressing Prophet Muhammad himself by saying, you don't know them, we know them. So we don't know them. We don't know those who wrote the legacy of Prophet Muhammad. We don't know who came to that with best intentions, and who came to that just to shame the Prophet and just to mess up everything, to corrupt everything, right?
Yes.
That's true.
Inconsistencies, contradictions is a clear demarcation of going the wrong direction, I would say, right? And even more seriously, it's a clear indication of lying, of fabrications, I would say, right?
You know, Doctor, I've noticed something. When they're traditional, they try to do the interpretation, which is contradiction to Quran. They always get in trouble because one, whatever you call one school of thought, they try to do interpretation, and then which is contradicting the Quran. Then another school of thought comes in, they're trying to do something else, and then they try to justify things, and that's where they get in trouble. Which is totally contradiction against Quran.
This is very true, Brother Sarfaz, and this is why we're now having this problem. We have to fix the meaning of 434 because it was handed down to us as out of a place, one misogynist, I would say, verse that contradicts the rest of the Quran and that goes opposite to the rest of the Quran. There is a proverb in Syrian Arabic, I'm from Syria, which says, حبل الكذب قصير. It's funny, literally it means the rope of lying is not that long, it's short, which means, and this is part of our human nature. If you lie about something, you will need to cover it up by another lie. The third time you do that, okay, there is a contradiction now. So when there are lies, there are contradictions. The Quranic language, so precise, doesn't allow for all of that. And this is my first reason to prioritize going back to problematic aspects in our tradition. And on the top of the list, I take 434 as my own responsibility. The second reason is a theological problem. So the traditional interpretation of 434 creates for us a huge problem when it comes to identifying God himself as a deity. Because to allow men, because they're men, to correct their wives, because they're women, by appealing to violence, either psychological violence, which is the case of withholding intimacy, or by beating them physically, I don't think it's appropriate or just to be said about a just God. We know God as a deity according to our understanding of God, or as the Quran introduces God to us as a benevolent, as a good God, as a just God. And I wonder what is just in arguing for based on gender superiority, in wronging
Right.
one gender and arguing for the other gender superiority based not on merit, just based on gender, when God created both genders. How do we know God won't allow something like that? Because the Quran indicates that if we read, for example, and just some random examples from 1044, we read, إن الله لا يظلم الناس شيئا ولكن الناس أنفسهم يظلمون. Indeed, Allah does not wrong people, but it's people who wrong themselves. So the second
Right.
reason I take out of so many reasons, I won't be covering all reasons we need or we have to go back to rethink 434, because we have this big theological question about who is God? Who is God? So gender egalitarianism is a basic requirement for our view and image of God as a just God, as a fair God.
No doubt. Yes.
That's a very good point. I think
Yes.
it's very important. The Quran mentioned the equality of the gender.
Right.
There's no discrimination on that.
Right. So it's essential, I would say, for correcting our image about God himself. And what can be more dangerous if we got the wrong image of God or the wrong view of God himself? Like the most radical idea in Islam is a strict monotheistic belief in one God, right? So if this got destroyed, and a just God, one just God. So if this gets destroyed because of, I would say, projections on the text, not something essential for the text, which is the Quranic text, we need to set that correct. Another reason is going back to the
Let
Quran.
me ask you before, I'm
Go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt you. When we talk about gender equality, how can God can be saying something, this kind of command, that, to do this, which is
Right,
going against the traditional interpretation?
right.
So my thing is, why still there are so many folks, they're saying, yeah, that's what it is, and that we have to obey what the God says. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah,
I mean, it does not make any sense. And they still, every single day, they're saying that is correct, that comes from the, traditional, and we have to believe in that. And they don't look at the Quran, the real meaning of this. And they're
right,
still living day by day the same thing
right.
going on. So I don't know.
Yeah. So your concern is why to go with ideas or why to insist on interpretations that clearly doesn't fit or don't fit the Quran,
Right.
and don't fit even our best interest. I would say, first of all, there is a lack of confidence. And second, and it applies to all of us, men, women, students, scholars, community. And second, there is a power of anything that comes from the tradition. It's kind of you're entering a sacred zone. So many people are not ready to go there. It's a mental process.
No.
It's very problematic for me even to go there. There is a price you pay for everything you advocate for, right? Some people even they're not aware of it. They're not ready for that price. It comes with opposition. Also, people, it's a natural tendency we have as human beings. No one likes to be corrected. So if you tell someone, hey, for 14 centuries, we got this probably we got this wrong, people will resist that. People are more comfortable. It applies to all of us. We're more comfortable with where we are and with things told to us. So leaving that your own comfort zone to new zones, probably it's a scary journey for I would say it applies to all of us, because there is a price. First of all, there is the risk of making mistakes, right? Is it the right opinion? Is my interpretation really valid, right? I need to go out, convince people about it. But I do believe, like, even we should be very, very brave to go back to the text times and times again. Maybe you will see me, even after, I'm not ashamed of that at all, after maybe two months with the new ideas, with the new concept. But here's the thing, what's really shameful is not reconsidering your views and correcting them and learning, to be in an ongoing learning process, because the Quran recommends, tafakkur, going times and times again, same tafakkur. It's not only you're glancing at verses or you're hearing someone saying something and you're repeating that. It's a responsibility as well. It's a huge responsibility, because reading a religious text at the end of the day is a human interact with the sacred. So it feels more safe to say, I'm gonna depend on someone's interpretation. I'm not gonna even try to go beyond that, right? So it's very understandable why we think very highly of our tradition. And this is not an invitation, to just dump everything we have in the tradition. Of course, it's an ongoing learning process, but we have to move forward with it. It's our responsibility to acknowledge, value what was given to us, and now to move forward with it and not to get stuck with it. And here's the difference of the two things.
Yeah, one thing I would like to add, like the problem is with our, all the human beings, like they think like God is like, they try to give the emotions that like we feel to relate it to God. Like Allah will be angry, Allah will be sad, Allah will be happy. And so this is human mentality, like this inequality in women and men. And they are, they go this way. They apply their mentality to God, and that's impossible. That's a worldly thing. Nothing related to.
Exactly. Because this type of interpretation, patriarchal interpretation, believing essentially in hierarchy as an essential part of any community construction, worked well for medieval scholars. It reflected their view of the world, right? It sounded very just for them. It sounded natural for them. And they, but what they did, exactly as you mentioned, they projected their needs on the text. What we want to do, to be fair to ourselves and to the text, is to try to extract meanings from the text, to do the opposite, if we want to be fair to ourselves and fair to the text. And this, I believe, should take place even if we don't like what we see in the text. For example, and I'm going to get to that when we get into discussing 434, many people tried to resolve the problem by saying, no, daraba doesn't mean beating. End of discussion. This is based on good intentions, but it's not accurate for readers of Arabic. We know it's unfortunate, right? But we know daraba means beating. We know
it is there. We cannot, ignore it.
And it's there. But I mean, many people, to get out of the embarrassment, were like, no, daraba doesn't even mean to beat. But even if we stay honest to the text, even by being literal, even by being, responsive to the text itself can clarify itself to us. It is beating, but it's not beating wives, as I'm going to get to that. Before we get to 434, quickly, more reasons for the need to reinterpret 434, because it might sound to the three of us obvious, like, yes, we need to go back to 434. Some people might ask, why you're discussing problematic aspects of religion? Why not to, share only the more bright sides of religion? We're saying that because, guys, there is a problem in our traditional understanding, and therefore we're trying to provide alternative understandings. So one of the other reasons is a verse, and I picked this verse for a purpose because all of us know this verse. And it's what we read in khutbah, in Friday khutbahs. And it's what you find in 1690. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى. Allah commands justice, the doing of good, and generosity towards the relatives. And my question is, so this is a general clarification that takes us to the divine mind of God, if we can say that. God commands what? Justice, doing what is good, and generosity towards relatives. And I wonder what part of 434 fits these three, let's say, goals of the revelation. Is it just to admonish your wife and then threaten her or show her that she's not attractive to you anymore, you're not attracted to her anymore, and then even escalate to ignoring her in bed and finally escalates to beating her? Is it just to do that? The second question is it doing what is good in a relationship? And the third one, is it being generous to your wife? Because the verse includes or indicates generosity towards relatives. Nothing meets the traditional understanding of 434. Another concern is, are we launching a war against Muslim men by doing that? Or are we launching a war with Muslim men against ignorance? Right? Against ignorance.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because here is the thing, Brother Sarfaz. The traditional interpretation of 434 is offensive to women, no doubt. It makes us, it portrays women as victims. But it's more offensive to Muslim men because it portrays them as perpetrators, right? So it's more offensive to the reputation of Muslim men. I'm saying this because many times people, the more traditionalist, I would say, they just got stuck with the label feminists. Yeah, those arguments are led by Western scholars. They're brainwashed. They're coming to attack the religion from inside the religion. We've heard all of those accusations. So to set things correct, this is a war to defend Muslim men more than to defend Muslim women.
And even this is the one of the main reason we have the misconception about Islam. The whole wide world. This is the one of the basic rights of the women, how they are addressed. This is the very important topic. We have to clear that.
Yeah, like I've been in the United States for almost 14 years now. And the number one question that people, the general audience, address us with is concerning the status of women in Islam. And many parts of that, unfortunately, is still out there, just surrounded with misunderstandings and really unfair things, even to Muslim men. So it's ugly enough to be seen as a victim, but it's more ugly to accuse Muslim men that they follow these three correction methods, and even worse, they recommended and commanded in a divinely way to go with that, right? Finally, a general comment about the methodology of going back to the Quran to interpret the Quran, because what you will see as I move to 434, I'm not going to be adding anything to the verse. I'm going to be moving word for word, just reading the text. I'm going to be depending on the Quran, using keywords from the Quran to unlock other words. The point that we need to clarify is the need to go back to the Quran to understand the Quran. What's the justification for doing that? And I'm going to say simply because we didn't do that. At least we didn't do that in a sufficient way, in an appropriate way. We didn't really value adopting, using the Quran to unlock the Quran as a research methodology, I would say. The Quran and any attempt to understand the Quran, unfortunately, in the tradition, was dominated by two other fields. First, what comes before the Quran, which is referred to as Asbab al-Nuzul, the occasions of revelation. And the second is what came after the Quran, which is our heritage-based exegetical processing of the Quran and the Hadith, or the prophetic tradition heritage, which comes after the Quran. And the question is, prioritizing everything but the Quran didn't really prove much value, didn't really solve our problems. And here's the serious concern about it. Asbab al-Nuzul is a human written, right? It's occasions of revelation. It's people speculating about this is the reason this verse and that verse was revealed in the first place. The tafsir, the exegetical reprocessing of the text, and the hadith is written also after the text, and the writing down the Quranic text, we can say it's more or less at least 100 years between writing the Quran and writing hadith. So it's a human-made effort as well to add to our understanding of the Quran. If we claim that the three resources, occasions of revelation, Asbab al-Nuzul, the Quran itself, and hadith and tafsir are equally sound, then we're arguing for three Qurans.
Yes, it's not
That's
possible.
a good point.
We're arguing for three Qurans.
No.
But it's only one Quran, and everything else should fit our need to understand the Quran itself. Now, if people prefer from time to time to get pieces of wisdom from Asbab al-Nuzul, the tafsir, the hadith, that is totally okay. But not in cases where you use that to contradict the Quranic message, or to end or to falsify the Quranic message, to go against the Quranic message. You do it only to explain the Quranic message. Anytime you see your resources going against the core of the Quranic message, you should know you're doing something wrong. And the question, can we be really believers by going back to the Quran? I would say the Quran says yes. And let's read another verse. All of us know this verse from chapter 2 Al-Baqarah. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. The prophet, the messenger, a loose interpretation. The messenger believed in what God revealed to him, or what was revealed to him from his Lord. And believers, al-mu'minun, all of them believed in God, his angels, his books, his messengers, without making a distinction between any of his messengers. And they say, we hear, we listen, and we obey, right? So the Quran describes those who follow the prophet back time, who was following at that time only the Quranic revelation, as believers, mu'minun. And the prophet who had only the Quran himself was described as a believer himself. But more important to this point is the reaction when you hear the Quran, when you listen to the Quran, when you receive a Quranic revelation. The Quran describes the reaction of true believers as people who would say, Sami'na wa ata'na, we listen and we obey. You listen to the Quranic message, you obey. You don't go here and there going after other interpretations. Yes,
very good point. Very good point.
I got the message, but there's something there. that Imam said another opinion about it, right? And this is only a big misunderstanding, which was unfortunately sold to us by some clerics and imams, that the Quranic text is so hard, it's impossible for anyone to go and read it for themselves and try to apply it by themselves to their lives, and which again contradicts the Quranic message itself. So from this general introduction to the need to rethink 434, I can move to introducing the verse, and I'm going to be introducing it both in Arabic and in English, and to some reflections on the verse itself.
All right.
So the verse says, and here I'm using the translation of Professor Abdul Halim, which is a perfect, an excellent translation. Of course, it's I don't use it to criticize the great effort done while translating it, but I'm using it eventually. Of course, I provide my own translation of this verse, but I'm using it as an example of the way mainstream Islam interpreted the verse, and as a result translated the verse. So the verse in Arabic is الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن, to the end of the verse. And it starts with, I'm going to read the translation, the mainstream translation. Husbands should take good care of their wives, which is provided here in this specific translation as the meaning of qawamun. I'm going to get back to qawamun, is problematic in itself, with the bounties God has given to some more than others, and with what they spend out of their money. Righteous wives are devout and guard what God would have them guard in their husband's absence. If you fear high-handedness from your wives, remind them of the teachings of God. Then ignore them when you go to bed, then hit them. If they obey you, you have no right to act against them. God is most high and great. What reasons do we have to challenge this interpretation? I would say, let me first provide the way I'm thinking of 434, and probably we go back to justifications of thinking it. Long story short, the verse is not addressing husbands with 3 correction methods to use to address marital conflicts. The verse is not related at all to marital conflicts. The verse is addressing the community, both men and women, with suggestions of 3 correction methods that they can use to deal with women who violate the laws in the community. So it's a criminal punishment. It has nothing to do with marital conflicts. Before I provide my own reflection.
So this is very important, I think, for viewers, what you have done with your research. So this is not applying to the husband and wives. Yes.
At
Is
all.
that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
at all. And what applies to the marital relationship is way more beautiful in the Quran. And I'm going to get to it after I'm done with clarifying the misunderstanding concerning 434. Sure, exactly. What applies to men and women is 2 verses. It's 4:128 and 435. Nothing applies to husbands and wives in 434. Before I start with some reflections, I should give credit to all people, all scholars who tried to find solutions to the embarrassment the traditional understanding of 434 brought us. So some tried ways to rethink the verse. Some, and this is Sister Hina, something we discussed together before we were starting the interview. Some argued for daraba, to hit or to beat, as a general reference to something or to other things other than beating women. Something like leave them. So if there is a marital conflict, leave your wives. And I would say this is not honest to the precise way the verb is mentioned in the Quran in 434 and precisely conjugated. وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. The precise conjugation of the verse, as all verbs in Arabic when conjugated, because it doesn't appear in the root form, so can't really go to the root and you say, okay, daraba'an or adraba'an means to leave or to ignore. Two things. First, the verb due to its conjugation is addressing the community, mixed community, men and women, with a recommendation to hit an absent community of women, right? Second, the verb will stand for ignore women. If you have a problem with your wife, ignore her, only if followed by a preposition. And it's not followed by a preposition here. So this is a problematic way of dealing with the verse. Of course, I appreciate the good intention. People thought, they absorbed that there is something wrong, but it was hard for all of us to pinpoint what's really going on there, right? And maybe others will come with even better reflections than what I'm going to be sharing with you today. Also, maybe others already shared what I'm sharing with you today, or part of it, because it's in the language itself. As I mentioned to you, I'm not going to be adding anything to the text. I'm going to be trying to find meanings within the text itself. So I won't be surprised at all that others found the same meaning, the logical meaning in the text itself. Some other attempts that I don't agree to is saying that the three correction methods are just in some cases, they go in order, and beating is only a better remedy. It's the last thing you should do before you divorce your wife, or in order to avoid divorcing your wife. And I would say, if the relation with your wife is getting so toxic that she doesn't respond to your needs unless you beat her, it's better for both of you to leave each other, and divorce is better in this case, and divorce is the solution in this case. Your wife, your partner, your soulmate, probably by beating her, you're thinking you can correct her, but you're corrupting your marriage, and you're corrupting your inner peace and your spirituality. So it's not the best solution for you, even as a husband.
Yes, one thing. In divorce, it's clear like how Allah has mentioned, like guideline, do not harm them. So how can this possible? Like divorce is easier than living together in a marital life.
Very
true. Not impossible.
Very true.
So, yeah.
Very true. Even in cases of conflicts, beating is not allowed. Beating is not allowed even with treatment or while treating animals, right? So beating as an advice in marriage, seriously, a divine advice in marriage, I don't think there is any way to find. I
think Dr. Hina mentioned, I think it's very clearly described in Surah Baqarah 231, verse 231. And you have to be nice even when you're divorcing someone.
Even when you're divorcing, right?
Yes. Where you have to be nice with them. You cannot punish them or harm them. I think you made a good point, Doctor, about the whole concept is 434 is reflecting the communities, the whole community. And then obviously you're going to say more about the next verse after that, which talks about,
what really applies to marriage, what really applies to marriage. So this is a little bit about so many contributions, people trying to solve the problem of 434. Some, for example, advocated for light beating. It's a beating with a feather or with miswak, And I ask, beating is beating. Beating is beating. And you know, if you slap your wife one time or 100 times, it's the same concept. So light beating also is not.
So why they change it? I'm sorry. That's interesting, because why they change, some people, they change from stick to miswak, and somebody change miswak to handkerchief.
Again, because it's embarrassing if you leave it as it is. So people try to find a solution to get out of the embarrassment, but it's not Quranic, because as we see in 434, it doesn't say how much this so-called beating can be repeated or the intensity of beating. But again, when you leave the zone of the Quran, you create problems, and you mentioned this, brother, before.
I was going to say that.
Discussion with you, yeah. Like traditionalists create problems for themselves, and then they try to solve these problems.
And that's a proof.
Take my words exactly. I'm going to say that they create it themselves, then they try to justify themselves, then they have more problems.
Yeah, and we're back to square one, to dealing with the problem. Why to create the problem in the first place? Just read the text, you know, be just sami'na, as I mentioned, sami'na wa ata'na. We listen and we obey, and that's it. It's very easy. So 434, a long introduction to 434. The first mistake is in the first word. الرجال are قوامون, which is translated here as they took good care of their wives, right? Rijal is men, translated here as husbands. The first mistake, right? There is no mention to husbands in the verse. The verse which rules away, it's related to any marital context. Rijal is men, okay? So let's start from there. Men are qawamun over nisa, again interpreted as wives. We understand it as wives, but nisa is women, it's not wives. So far, I don't have any reference to any marital context. And qawamun, I have another long argument for qawamun. It's a different topic, but to keep things simple, qawamun is a rewardable duty. Men can spend on female figures in their families if interested in the reward. Not all men are qawamun, because it's with what God has فضل الله بعضهم على بعض, favored some of them to some others. So only the best, I would say, out of men are the men who would consider spending, right? وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم, and with what they spend out of their money, you're spending, and therefore you're qawam. And here, بعضهم على بعض, some of them, because I have the preference, masculine, بعضهم على بعض, to masculine. So it's not as it's told, or it's been shared with us, that it's qawamun, all men are favored to all women. It's not بعضهم على بعضهن, it's بعضهم على بعض, masculine to masculine.
Powerful meaning that is financially powerful, or it can be physically powerful.
I would say it's a financial, just if you consider spending, if you consider spending, it's rewardable duty. Not all men can live up to this duty. Because it goes beyond spending on your wife, by the way. We're not speaking about wives at all. It can include spending on your sister, spending on your mother, things like that. So I would say the verse is saying the best out of men, or the men who would like to meet the criterion of being qawamun, are those, first, they're preferred by God because they're going beyond the duty, I would say, going beyond the duty. So I don't assume if a man says, I don't want to spend on
so
women.
Dr. Abla, how about in the West? Like, some women are more financially powerful than the men.
Yeah, if the case is a man has bounties, right, and he wants to consider spending on women in his family, I would take it as a rewardable duty or going beyond the duty, but they're not sinners if they don't do that, from what I read so far. But what matters here is to exclude qawamun as a reference to gender-based superiority, which means not all men are qawamun. It's some men. You meet some criteria, you do something, and then you're qawam. Or maybe it's just describing, maybe it's not even a duty, maybe it's describing men who can be soundly said or described as qawamun, right? But I take it as also it's something it's something appropriate for probably Muslim men to consider. So far we have the verse mentioning to the qawama between men and women. We don't have husbands and wives, and we move forward. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ, righteous wives. It's not wives again. As-salihat is righteous women, And the verse here will do something. The verse will draw a contrast between good women in the community, describe them, how a woman can be a good woman, and then it's going to escalate, it's going to move from that to draw a contrast with women who violates all of that, and then the verse will recommend the 3 correction methods. So salihat by itself doesn't essentially mean righteous wives. Salihat is righteous women. How do we know that? By going back to the Quran. Salih or salihah in the Quran as adjective, it can refer to anything sound, to anything appropriate, to any good behavior, sound behavior, approved person. It refers in the Quran, it can refer to not only human beings, but demons or jinn themselves, as we read in 21, 105, and 72:11. So any approved behavior, or a person who considers approved behavior a righteous person can be considered salih. So those are righteous women. We move on. Qanitat. Righteous women are devout. And many times qanitat is understood in the tradition as essentially referring to and designating an obedient wife. To be qanita means to be an obedient wife. Not Quranic again. Why? Because in the Quran, iqnuti, or obey God, be devout to God, was addressed in 343 to Mary, the mother of Jesus. According to the Quran, she was not known to be the wife of anyone. So to be qanita is to be devout, to be obedient to who? To be obedient to God himself.
To God. That's
Not
the point.
to your husband. I'm not saying that to be obedient, good to your husband, it cannot be a good thing or a subcategory of being obedient to God. Yes, it fits that category, but it doesn't exhaust that category. So it's part of being devout to God to be obedient to your husband, or to be a friend with your husband, right? To be a team, to act as a team. But it's a subcategory of it. It's again nothing really essential to the marital context. We move. حافظات للغيب, they preserve when unseen. الغيب means unseen. And the question, حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله, it's interpreted as when unseen by their husbands. They guard what God asked to be guarded. And the question, I don't see husbands again. It's just inserted in the interpretation. As a result, it's inserted in the translation. The verse itself says the opposite. It says those women guard when unseen, and it's left open, what God himself asked to be guarded. So those women are devout, obedient to God. They maintain a perfect behavior, and they guard what God asked to be guarded, even when unseen by anyone, I would say. So this is the good women in the community, right?
Yes.
We move from that to the 3 correction methods. Now, وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ. And here, those who you fear their high-handedness. And the big question, who's the addressee here? If only we go back to 429, 429. The real addressee, because the dialogue will start from there. The real addressee in 429 is, "O you who believe," or "O believers, both men and women." But it's misunderstood as addressing men or as addressing only husbands, with no evidence. Not only we don't have an evidence, it contradicts the real addressee, which is the community of believers, both men and women, as we see in 429. And I refer to this, which is seen so many other places in the Quran, by the way. In the book introduction, I refer it as one of the challenges that prevented the real understanding of so many gender egalitarian verses in the Quran. I refer to it as the male addressee fallacy. Male addressee fallacy. What do we mean by male addressee fallacy? Every time a verse is addressing by using the subject pronoun you, which can address in Arabic both a masculine group or a mixed group equally soundly in Arabic, it is understood as making an exclusive reference to men, or even worse, to husbands. So the real addressee in 434, as we see in 429, is the community of believers. Another assurance.
I'm sorry, Doctor, I want to interrupt. Why so many scholars and other traditional who translated this word miss that point? You made such a good point. When you look at the Surah 429, it talks about the whole concept, the community they're talking about. Allah is talking about that. How come they missed that important point and they targeted the husbands?
Right, right. I believe it sounded very natural and even logical to them, because if we go back to the history of exegetical processing of the Quran, it's dominated by male interpreters. And if you have a male dominance, this is patriarchy speaking. If you have a male dominance and the absolute absence of female voices, this is a natural outcome of their absence. And even for those, by the way, I hear this argument from time to time. No, there were female voices, exegetical voices, and and judges and all of that. But I would say even those very few voices had to seek validation by fitting into the patriarchal agendas. Because you need an authority for your voice, right? What do we know about voices of the marginalized? Do we know about their voices, right? It's commonly said, but not fully comprehended, when people say history is written by the victors, right? And I believe many times religion is also understood by those in power. It's a human tendency. Those in power can direct different arguments the way they prefer, the way they see more fitting. And this applies not only to patriarchy. Any person in power can dominate the production, including the intellectual production. And therefore, I believe, maybe there are other reasons for that, but personally, I believe this is one reason that we see so many clear indications in the text, not only in 434, but in so many other places, going one way, and the interpretation will go the opposite way. It's not the text speaking, it's the needs that people wanted to move forward with, and to seek authority, to seek divine validation for the way they viewed life, the way they viewed hierarchy in their societies, in their communities.
Yes. Now the thing is, they have done what they could, like the thing is like upon us now how we take the verses, and we have to check the context, like you mentioned, like 429 and 435. It's obvious, like it's talking about community.
Exactly.
So, we should not blindly follow what has been, done in the interpretations. And we have to open our mind and look very critically. We have to, that's how we can come to the true meaning.
Right, but like the doctor said in the beginning, in the beginning when Doctor said, very well said
Yes.
by Dr. Abla, that they have this thing going on. I mean, how it's been going on for 1400 years now, 1500.
Mm.
When you tell them this is the right stuff, and they get, what? What? I mean, it's so
Yeah.
hard for them to get
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
It's been going on for such a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, because here's the thing. You need the authority to interpret the text, and you need the authority to challenge that interpretation. You need a platform for your voice to be heard. And now we have this platform, but I don't think we're the only people who noticed these contradictions in the text or who were annoyed by the traditional interpretation of 434. Out of so many questions I get about like women in the Quran, number one question is 434. Everyone I met are annoyed by the traditional interpretation of 434. But it was there for a while, and it's the authority of prestigious names out there who argued for that, and it's very challenging to go and to say no, this is wrong. This is not what I see in the Quran. And also something I try to apply to my research. We shouldn't also be doing the opposite, which means I shouldn't challenge patriarchal interpretations of the Quran by appealing to feminist interpretations of the Quran. I should be objective and honest to what I see in the text itself. Because if we don't arrest ourselves, if we don't chase ourselves every time we want to project our needs on the text, we will end up, Brother Sarfaz, with the same mistakes. We will just project our needs to the text, and the text is quiet again. We will again distract ourselves from the text. In my book, I use a methodology of being very strict to the Quran, just tafsir al-Quran by al-Quran, and I appeal to something I call the completeness of the Quranic language, which means every term or word in the Quran can be interpreted by trying to detect the same term in the Quran itself. Don't go beyond the Quran, so you stay on the safe side. Doesn't mean that we're not consulting with the great efforts of other scholars, but personally for me, this is an effort to stay faithful to what the text says and to avoid just projecting our more modern agendas to the text. We're just annoyed by medieval interpretations. We want obviously more gender egalitarian, humanitarian interpretation of the Quran, and we don't want to end up just replacing the lens, I would say, we use to reading the Quran. The most safe route, I would say, is to seek validation for your interpretations from within the Quran. Although it's very hard, and for many, it's can we even do that? So far, I've seen, even if we appeal to the generality of the Quran, so for example, for the things that is left out intentionally general, leave them general. Don't seek so many details from outside the Quran. And this is one of the problems we had with our interpretations of the Quran. We added too much details to the Quran from outside the Quran, and we go to read the Quran only in a poor retrospective way. We consult with the Quran the last thing, not the first thing.
Last thing, yes.
Yeah, a very long answer to your question, my brother, but a very valid question, and we had to pause there.
Let's come back to the 434, I think.
Yes. And thank you, Sister Hena, for mentioning 435. That was going to be my next point. If we go not only to the preceding verse, if we go to the following verse, to 435, we can tell as well it's the community of believers again, which is addressed in 435. And my question is, if the community of believers, both men and women, is addressed in the preceding verse, and the community of believers, both men and women, is addressed in the following verse, and I don't have any reference to a husband-wife relationship, why to think of this twist, immediate, unsupported by any evidence twist in 434, right? We don't have any.
Right, it's obvious, yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll finish the 3 correction methods and we come back to your comment or your question. So the 3 correction methods starts by addressing the community by those who you fear their nushuz, translated as high-handedness. And I know according to later lexical development of the word or the term nushuz, it's become to be understood as essentially referring to marital disobedience. But the case as a Quranic term is more general. To draw a quick comparison between nushuz in 434 and nushuz in 128, we can understand that nushuz in 128, if a woman fears from وإن امرأة خافت من بعلها نشوزا أو إعراضا, if a woman fears from her husband, بعل, husband, right, nushuz or إعراض, which might be loosely translated as alienation, okay, or negligence. So nushuz in 128 refers to marriage because we have if a woman fears from her husband, from ba'liha. Unlike 434, we have a mention to husband. So it makes a clear reference to husband-wife relation, unlike 434. Mm-hmm. Another evidence for a general meaning of nushuz comes also from the Quran, from 58:11. وَإِنْ قِيلَ لَكُمْ انشِزُوا فَانشِزُوا. If it's said to you believers, stand up, rise, when everyone else are seated down, do that, right? Which means any behavior that can be described according to the Quran as different from others. I would say violations of law. Women are not showing, in this case, are not showing any consideration to any regulations, rulings, or laws that the rest of the community are respecting. So they're deviated, I would say. They went astray. So nushuz is doing something the rest are not doing, right? Something different from what the rest are doing. What are the 3 correction methods, right? It starts with عِظُوهُنَّ. Advise them, remind them. And I take it as repeated warnings, maybe community warnings, congregation warnings, court warnings. And it's repeated as long as, and it's left loose here, right? You can see it's left loose. How many times? It's according to people to decide how many times you give someone a warning before you escalate to something else. It moves then to اهجروهن في المضاجع. Another problem. So many people, which stands according to the traditional interpretation as withhold intimacy or sex, right? Another problem, because many people think that daraba, to beat, is the only problematic aspect of the verse. What about advising men to use intimacy against or withholding sex against their wives? Is psychological abuse any better than physical abuse? This is another question. Would it be something the divine text would include, right? اهجرهن في المضاجع understood in a metaphoric way as ignore them in beds, right? And madaja is understood as bed, right? Yeah. First of all, it can't stand for withholding sex for a reason, because it would contradict the strict prohibition of what is called dhihar. We see in the Quran in 58, 1-4. Mm-hmm. And dhihar refers to a pre-Islamic correction method in marriage. A man will tell his wife, to me, you're like the back of my mother, indicating that he's not interested in her anymore. And the Quran in 58, 1-4 prohibits even saying it. A husband, if a husband says something like that, he can't go back to his wife as a husband and a wife before fasting for 2 months or setting a slave free. And the question is, how can 434 provided as an advice for men to move in with using it, to move forward with using it, and prohibits that in such a strict way, prohibits even saying that in such a strict way in 58 1
Very good point, Dr.
And yeah, and if it's about community, as you're saying, why would Allah talk about like intimacy thing? Like, like it's not, does not go with that. Like other women, it could be, other than wives also, like women,
Right.
not just wives.
Right.
So
Exactly. No mention to wives at all. So
yeah.
leave them in madaja. The second problematic aspect, madaja is understood as a metaphor leave them in their beds. All of it is understood in a metaphoric way to withholding sex. But literally it means lock them in their bedrooms. Madja in Arabic is for beginners in Arabic, they know what is ism al-makan, noun place. And it's driven from daja'a, from the root daja'a, according to a specific way, to refer to bedrooms. Madaja is bedrooms and it's not bed. To give you another example, masajid. We all know the meaning of masajid, right? Mosques. And masjid, same to madja, is driven from the root sajada, to prostrate, to refer to the place you prostrate in, which is the mosque. So ihjuruhunna fil madaji' escalates to the punishment, the community punishment can move to locking violators, criminals, female criminals in their bedrooms. And the question is, why to lock them in their bedrooms, and why and I got this question before, why only women, why not men and women? First of all, at the time it was the tradition, or it was the custom that people are locked in their own places, right? Second, I would say women are treated in the Quran as a very delicate group that can be easily wronged if just merged with everything or everyone else in the community. So probably it's more protecting if women are locked in their own homes, right? If the idea is for you to be isolated for a while from the community, it's better for you to be locked in your own home. Women until today, when sent to prisons, many of them, they got subject to sexual harassment and to others smearing their reputation, many times to the end of their lives. So it's a way of protecting women who lived in the 7th century, I would say. Maybe, and again, maybe this is because we don't know really the intention, but at least it fits with women as a protected category in the Quran. And it's no secret that in the Quran, orphans, the elderly, women, anyone in need, right? The poor, al-masakin, the miserable. The Quran prioritizes the need of those who needs protection. It's no secret, right? The Quran is there to set our norms right, and it's many times, I would say all the time, it holds at the back of those who needs a protection, of those who need a protection. Finally, it can escalate to beating them, right? And beating is today we exclude beating, right? We don't beat prisoners, and I would say it will be perfectly Quranic, right? Because those are recommendations to courts. If the court or the community or the congregation are okay with only repeated warnings, that's fine. Maybe there is no need to escalate to locking them in prisons. If we exclude beating, that's totally okay. And this is something general about the Quran. The Quran speaks a very general language when it moves to, I would say, legal rulings. A clear example is 4:58. وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. If you rule people, if you govern people, seek justice. And the Quran leaves the term justice open to you. And clearly, justice in one country is not the same like in another place or country. Justice in 14 centuries ago is not the same like justice today. And it's up to people to, I would say, find what fits best their communities and what meets their standards. Now, a general thing about the Quran, is physical beating a criminal punishment in the Quran? Yes, it is a criminal punishment in the Quran. We see the punishment for publicly witnessed fornication, and I have to repeat, it's publicly witnessed fornication, right? Witnessed by 4 people. It's 100 lashes. Of course, there is no stoning, right? This is another topic. There is no stoning at all. But it's 100 lashes. So yes, there is a place in the Quran to acknowledge physical correction as a correction method. But if a community goes with dropping it, I would say, why not? It is still Quranic. I dream of the time when not only we drop beating, but we drop even prisons and sending people to prisons as a correction method. Because no one comes, no offense to many who would do that. I would say many times people are not getting the help they need in a prison. What about considering more schools than more prisons? What about considering therapy more than considering punishments? So maybe humanity will move. I dream of the day when we move even beyond the need to appeal to the prison system as a system we consider. So
Very
this
good point.
so these are some of the arguments I include in the book as well. Maybe something that appeals to those who seek guidance from the prophetic behavior. The prophet is considered a role model, as we see in the Quran, for all Muslims. And the big question is from the behavior of the prophet as a husband. If the prophet is asked to use these 3 correction methods, and we know that the prophet never appealed to these correction methods with his wives. So a big question, is it really what we understood 434 to be, right? And maybe I can stop here with clarifying the misunderstanding about 434, and I can move to another question, which is, what should we do then in marriage, right? What is the advice provided in the Quran for marital conflicts? If 434 doesn't address marital conflict, what really addresses marital conflict in the Quran? I can move to that, but first I want to come back to your question, Brother Surfaz, or your comment.
Yes, I just want to make sure if all the viewers are clear on that. So there's no concept in 434 as far as physically beating. There's no such thing as physically beating. And that, again, when you
Physically
go...
beating wives. So no
Right,
physical beating of wives. The verse is
right.
not related to wives at all. It's a community
Right.
punishment. And it's not left loose to angry husbands. It's now to be determined by courts. So
By the court, right.
by the court. It's more rational to say it's up to the court. If the law says no physical beating, I would say then no physical beating, right? The Quran is providing some advice on rulings, but again, the general rule in the Quran, وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. If you rule or govern people, or if you're in charge, in the community, seek justice. So we need to solve the big question: what is just? What is justice? And under that, we go with everything else.
And the community,
definitely has nothing to do with husbands and wives. Yes,
right. That's the major point, I think. And it's 435 clearly said that you need to have somebody who can decide the punishment, like if there is a punishment needed on 435. And also in 436, when you look at 436, I'm going to ask you, Allah says, be kind to everyone. And, also Allah don't like those people, boastful people, those people who are arrogant. Allah does not like that on 436. So the whole concept, when you look from 449 all the way to 436, basically they're talking about the whole community and how to behave with each other, and the people who are less powerful, how to behave with those
Right.
people.
So it's a community decision if you want to go with that. It's not a recommendation to angry husbands or
Right.
a license to angry husbands to abuse their wives, either psychologically or physically. And now we can move now to the beauty of the Quran, right? And I'm happy you mentioned 435 because this is what we need to be considering, right? So two verses.
Sister, can we, what I understood from before going to 435, correct me if I am wrong, like I took like Kawamuna means like supporters. They have more, like responsibilities towards women. In the house there could be a sister or daughter or mother, other than the wife also. So he has responsibility of both. There are two categories of women. One is the loyal and the
Yeah,
Kanata.
it's optional. It's optional. Men who would like to consider it, it's rewardable. It's rewardable and optional. Men who would like to consider financially supporting women in their families.
Okay, it's optional. But then there are two categories of women. Like one is the
Yeah,
loyal one.
because we excluded wives as the meaning in the verse. So yes, it can extend to other women. It
Other
can take
women.
the shape of, and the form of a gift to your mother or a gift to your sister, something like that.
Okay. So and then there's a strategy, like step one, like two or three, like we can say how to handle these situations, right?
Right. If this helps, maybe I'll read my new interpretation of 434 quickly
Yes,
before,
sure.
yeah, because this will close discussion of the way 434 is misunderstood. Before we go back, what the Quran then say about marriage? So I said I provide this as my interpretation for 434 and my translation. Men are the financial guardians of women, those men whom God has favored some of them to others, and those who spend from their money. Righteous women are devout. They guard what God asked to be guarded, even when unseen. Those women among you, believers, whom you fear high-handedness, admonish them and place them in house arrest and strike them. If they obey you, seek no more correction. God is most high and great. And with this, I can end my discussion of 434. This leaves us with the question. So we have marital conflicts, right? Obviously, no one enters marriage thinking of conflicts, but conflicts, disagreement is a natural part of life. How does the Quran address that? Two correction methods in the Quran. And you will notice with me, we're moving from the ugliness, and I'm sorry to say that, our interpretations to the beauty of the Quran, because the relationship between the husband and the wife in the Quran is understood and presented as one of the miracles and the signs of God, and the even the goal of marriage is sakina, tranquility, right? It's a beautiful relationship. So when things come up, what should we consider? Step number one is seen in 4:128. وإن امرأة خافت من بعلها نشوزا أو إعراضا فلا جناح عليهما أن يصلحا بينهما صلحا والصلح خير وأحضرت الأنفس الشح وإن تحسنوا وتتقوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. If a wife, right, and now if a wife or if a woman, right, fears خافت high-handedness نشوز or إعراض من بعلها from her husband. So I have the word husband. So what should a woman do in this case? Neither of them will be blamed if they come to a peaceful settlement. For peace is best. Although human souls are prone to selfishness, if you do good and are mindful of God, He's well aware of all that you do. See the beauty in the verse. It starts with addressing the fear, a woman's or a wife's fear. And we all know, and this is speaking to the psychology of women. Usually, women are the guardians of their nests, right? The emotional status in their marriages. They're more sensitive to problems. They can anticipate and address any problem, even before it starts. So the verse is addressing the feelings of women first, right? And it says, if you fear as a woman, or if a woman fears from her husband, and it addresses two things. First, nushuz. And nushuz is any behavior that goes out of the expected, and we leave it general. Why? Because an expected behavior in one community might be something totally different from what is expected from husbands in another community. So it's up to different, because and this is the universal nature of the Quranic message. It's up to communities, congregations, societies, people from different times and places. If a woman fears one of two things in her marriage: high-handedness, unexpected behaviors that doesn't live up to her expectations, or i'rad, alienation or negligence. And the beauty here is acknowledging negligence as a reason you should worry about your marriage for. Because women doesn't only feel offended by what their husbands can do, but they sometimes feel offended by what their husbands fail to do, right? Which is, I take it as a revolutionary move here. A husband can cause his wife to be sad or concerned, not because he's doing wrong things, but sometimes because he's not doing the right thing, or he's
Right.
not. And maybe it's not intentional at all. Maybe he's busy, but she feels he's not there for her, right? And the other beautiful step, what is the Quranic recommendation? It moves from وَإِنْ امْرَأَةٌ, if a wife or if a woman, immediately to joining the couple by using the dual form. فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا. There is no blame on both of them if they seek settlement. And you see, it's an immediate invitation. Start a dialogue with your husband. Both of you sit together and talk about what's annoying you in your marriage. Immediately. Don't keep it for yourself, right? Don't go and, complain about your husband to your friend, to your family, to your mother. Don't do this and that. It moves immediately from your concerns. Share them with your husband. He's your best partner.
Very good point.
And therefore, and you're telling me about admonishing wives and withholding sex and beating. Seriously, this is the Quran. This is the Quran. It encourages couples into start a dialogue, address it. This is the way. There is no blame in doing that. And why the assertion? And it gives even a motivation for women. Peace is good. Peace is the best, it's saying. Why is it asserting that to women? Because many will be just, intimidated by the idea of addressing conflicts, addressing problems. Maybe addressing problems will start a problem in my marriage, right?
It's very good analysis, Dr. Abla. Very good analysis by you. I think we've missed such a good message from Allah, and we're listening to all traditional things. Such a good message you have conveyed to the audience, and which is in Quran.
Thank you.
To consult with your husband, to talk to your husband or wife, so forth. and deal with the situation in a nice way. And this is amazing. This is all in Quran, and we miss that such a beautiful verses in Quran, and listen to all the folks, all the traditional trying to.
I mean, no offense, right? No offense to anyone, but we're trying here to be, more fair to the Quran itself. And I don't see that we were really fair to the beauty of 4128 at least, right?
Yeah.
Or by deviating from 4128 to going into what we assumed about 434. So
Right.
it's a concern by a woman, and it escalates from that. Immediately go and start a dialogue. And there is also another I would say a very smart move in the verse. وَأُتِيَتِ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحَّ. Human souls are prone to stinginess. And you ask yourself, what does this part of the verse has to do with the rest of it? It's an affirmation of a concern that anyone who wants to start a dialogue about problems will have. Because we know, once we sit together to talk about a problem, to address a conflict, people will jump into your fault, my fault game, right? It's your fault. You
Yes.
did. You said your character. Many times we avoid discussing problems because we don't like that part. So the Quran is saying it's a natural part. Everyone is kind of stingy when it comes to their rights and their duties. So it's saying, expect that in the dialogue. It's totally okay to be there, right? I'm not saying you go all the way with that, but expect that. And more importantly, don't let that hold you from starting the conversation with your partner, because this is the first step. And of course, the verse moves into reminding us of two things, right? Reminding us of ihsan wa in tuhsinu. And ihsan is to do what is good, and the root is husn, to beautify. So go even beyond the duty in beautifying your language, right? And fear God, because what would prevent you from blaming the other? It's fearing God, right? I can accuse you of all the things I do in marriage, right? You're the messy one, right? And I'm just the perfect one. But if you fear God, you will stop and pause. No, I should be honest and acknowledge that yes, it was my mistake that time. And ihsan, going beyond the duty and beautifying even the language you use for such an important step in solving marital conflicts. Before I move to step 2, I'm not going to go into the details, but just I want to mention that I'm aware of it, right? And this is something I address in the book. I don't want even to go into the traditional interpretation of 4128, because you won't see anything of what I included. Maybe I can share just quickly, but I don't want to go.
Sure, why not?
Just quickly, it is understood, unfortunately, by many as addressing the wife with the obligation of giving her husband a permission to seek a new marriage with a younger woman, while dropping all her rights as a wife for aging, not because she did something wrong, but for aging. So a husband can seek a new wife. He can tell his wife, I'm not gonna have, I'm not gonna live with you, right? I need your dowry back. You don't expect me spending, and this is all in exchange of leaving you as my wife, and therefore you won't deserve the social stigma of being named as a divorced woman. This is a different topic. I'm not going to go into that, but I just wanted to mention that people who go to the old books of tafsir, unfortunately, they're going to be missing a lot of the beauty of the verse, because instead of addressing what the verse says, exegetes, patriarchy speaking again, went into a whole process of falsification. And وَأُتِيَتْ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحَّ, human souls, al-anfus, human souls are prone to stinginess, was addressed only to women. Don't be stingy. Allow your husband a new wife, and you should give back your dowry. You should give back your right to live with him, your right to intimacy. So it doesn't even, long story short, doesn't even meet the criteria for polygamy or Islamic polygyny, because we know that Islamic polygyny at least asks for fairness in spending, in intimacy, and all of that. So it's an ugly kind of polygyny that drops all rights because a woman aged enough that she doesn't deserve to be a wife. I know it's a place I didn't want even to go to. Back to the beauty again. Yeah, back to the beauty again, though, and I'm ending with this. What happens if step one doesn't work, right? So a husband and a wife. First, the wife had some concerns. She opened up to her husband. They started a dialogue. The Quran reminds both of them to fear God, to expect it's not going to be an easy task. Nothing is working. Step two. And step two is 435. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا إِنْ يُرِيدَا إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقُ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيمًا خَبِيرًا. And if you, and again, community of believers, if you fear dissension between the two, send an arbitrator from his people and one from her people. If they both desire reconciliation, Allah will cause it between them. Indeed, Allah is ever knowing and acquainted with all things. Now things got beyond what you can handle or deal with as a husband and wife. And to be realistic, it happens. Sometimes it's beyond what we can sit together and solve together. Now, a community involvement. And this is translated in our days to marriage counseling, I would say, marriage counseling. But at that time, or maybe if you have a strong family system, some of our communities are like that, you can seek help from family members. So what is the advice? Send someone from her side, someone sage, maybe someone who can speak well from her side, someone from his side. They will sit together and they will discuss the problem together to restore the lost peace in marriage, right? And another, and of course, it's using the wisdom of others, right? Maybe we said that you use the best way of opening up, about problems with your husband.
Right.
But maybe you have temper, you're angry. Once you start, talking about problems, it escalates between both of you. And it applies to husbands and wives. Therefore, maybe I'll send someone on her behalf, someone on his behalf. They'll sit down in a calm, situation, in a calm state. They rationally address problems. And since this is step number 2, probably we will end up solving the problem. The last thing I want to address with this beautiful verse as well, all Quranic verses are beautiful, but it's beautiful when we compare it to what we lost while reading the Quran, is the conditional sentence, in yurida islahan yuwaffiqullahu baynahuma. If they really desire, peace, God will made it happen, right? Which means you don't send anyone from your family. You did, no offense, if your mother doesn't get along with your wife, you won't send her, right? No offense. Or if some of the relatives, since we're married,
very, very good point. Very good
valid point.
You send someone from both sides. Or if your mother doesn't, really, she's not happy with your husband, because what they're gonna do, they're gonna fight. You're gonna send someone to from your side, from his side, they're gonna fight. So you're replacing fights by others' fights. In yurida islahan, be very, I would say, savvy in the person you're choosing. Seek someone from your side who really wants this marriage to happen, who really wants the best for you, who wants to see you, once you complain to them, they'll say, no, you have a good husband, give it a chance. If someone gives you this advice, sometimes it's out of jealousy. You leave him, don't stay with him, that's it. Or he doesn't deserve you in the first place. You don't send those people for
Very good point.
You don't do that. And God gives us a divine guarantee, if you send the right people, it's going to happen, right? And what can be more beautiful than this? And with this very long discussion, I'm ending. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
No, thanks. This is such a very good point you made, Dr. Abla. I think it's very good information for our viewers.
Okay, thank you, sister. Like, you have discussed, so well, like, and I think we should have further discussions with you about the role of women, what Quran says about women, and these are very important topics and needs clarifications. Inshallah, you will be coming in our program.
Inshallah, inshallah. My honor and my pleasure.
So, Doctor, thanks for your time today. And in the end, like we always ask our guests to please give a message to our viewers. Please go ahead.
Yes, I would like, finally to end with, acknowledging your efforts in all of this, providing a platform. And I want to share with viewers that if you hear anything of what I mentioned as very strange, and very new, I would say welcome to the club. We've all been there, right? A lot of what we're doing is just part of an ongoing process to really go back to the authentic Quranic message. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge, the so many things I'm learning myself from this channel and from the great intellectuals you invite to this great program, including but not limited to our beloved scholar, Professor Omar Ramahi, right? I got the pleasure of knowing about your program through Professor Omar, and knowing, sharing a lot, through and I'm today here because of, starting this communication through him and through watching his lectures and the other awesome lectures, all guest speakers as well. So it's an ongoing process, I would say. We're all partners in doing that. It's a mutual process. None of us can claim absolute truth, including myself, but we can work together on making sense of our religion and making sense of the Quran. And
thank you, Doctor. Very good message. Thank you, Doctor, for your time. Very good message to our viewers. And in the end, again, I'm going to ask the viewers, please study Quran, learn Quran, and ponder more on Quran. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Take care of your neighbors. For us, goodbye for us, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. We will see you next time. Thank you, Doctor, for your time.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.